The general has returned from his campaign, and he has brought back a pregnant woman. Firecrackers were popping in the front courtyard, celebrating Arthur's triumphant return. My respected mother-in-law, however, had ordered me to wait in my own courtyard, citing that women of the inner quarters should not meet with outside men. Daisy, my maid, came running from the front, out of breath. "My lady, why aren't you reacting?" My hand, flicking the beads of my golden abacus, paused. I shook my head with feigned wisdom. He is a general, and the noble marquis. I can't scold him, I can't beat him, so I might as well save my energy and earn more money. Compared to a husband taking a concubine, I found the prospect of being poor far more terrifying. I was of merchant status, so marrying Arthur was considered marrying up. My father, worried I would be mistreated, had given me 12 streets' worth of shops as my dowry: jewelry stores, silk emporiums, cosmetic shops, inns, and restaurants. They turned a handsome profit each year. With money to my name, life wasn't too difficult. But Arthur's family had always looked down on my background. My mother-in-law once said in front of a group of ladies that I lacked refinement and that my womb was useless, having failed to produce an heir in 2 years. But she knew perfectly well that on our wedding day, Arthur was ordered to the border. He had only hastily lifted my veil before leaving for 2 years. He probably didn't even remember what I looked like. If my womb had been productive, I truly would have been in a situation I couldn't explain. The autumn wind was bleak. The leaves of the phoenix tree in my courtyard were turning yellow, ready to fall. Daisy, feeling that I wasn't living up to expectations, sat down opposite me, picked up an account book, and sighed. "You have enough money to last 8 lifetimes. What is the use of having so much?" I thought about it and found her reasoning sound. The greatest tragedy in life is to die with money left unspent. The thought of some unlucky child inheriting my hard-earned silver made my heart ache. I immediately took out 100,000 silver taels from my treasure box and handed them to Daisy. "Help me buy the land in the western suburbs. Buy as much as you can." There were 1,000 acres of good land there, originally belonging to a minister. But I heard his only son had offended the prince, losing the family fortune. They had to sell their ancestral land to save the prodigal son. Though I wasn't short on cash, I didn't own much land. In the event of a natural disaster, land was better than money. Stockpiling grain was the sensible thing to do. Daisy clearly agreed with me, forgetting all about the drama in the front courtyard. She leaned in with a fawning smile. "My lady, since we're buying, why not buy the apricot grove on the western mountain as well? In the spring we could admire the blossoms. As it grew warmer, we could eat fresh apricots. Any leftovers could be sold. It was a guaranteed profit." I considered it for a moment, thought it an excellent idea, and with a grand wave of my hand declared, "Approved." Spending money was always a joy. After reviewing the ledgers and seeing the profits from the shops had increased again, I couldn't help but lament. The speed at which I spend money is too slow. It is truly vexing. Daisy gave me a speechless look. In the evening, a maid from the front courtyard came to inform me that the old madam had invited me for dinner. I changed into a special outfit, a luxurious and elegant cloud-patterned brocade, a golden hairpin inlaid with colorful gems, and a vibrant green jade bracelet. It made my skin look as white as snow, exceptionally beautiful. Like a gleaming golden peacock, I flamboyantly arrived at the front courtyard. The moment she saw me, my mother-in-law's smile turned to disdain. "Mrs. Sterling, come and meet your sister." I looked and saw a woman standing behind the long, unseen Arthur. Her belly wasn't showing yet. She looked shy and timid. Her cheeks flushed. Her hair was a dull yellow, suggesting malnutrition. She was nothing special, but Arthur was very protective of her, shielding her behind him as if he feared I would harm her. I smiled. "So this is the young lady my husband brought back. She is so quaint." The girl's face stiffened, and she looked as if she was about to cry. A wave of pity washed over Arthur. He shot me a cold glare. "Why must you make things difficult for Rosalie?" Everyone around me glared at me, yet I had done nothing. In fact, I was the victim here. My husband had a child with another woman and had shamelessly brought her home. Although no one said anything to my face, by tomorrow, I would be the laughingstock of the ladies' circle. No one cared about that. In their eyes, I was just a jealous, wicked woman, bullying a pitiful young girl. The servants could only hold their tongues, but my mother-in-law saw no reason to restrain herself. Rosalie is carrying Arthur's child. We can't let her be wronged. We will welcome her into the manor as a high-ranking concubine for now. For now? I laughed. If she gave birth to a son, would she be elevated to an equal wife? Or even better, would they divorce me to make room for her? I looked at Arthur, and he had a look of complete agreement. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I said nothing, just lifted my teacup and took a sip. The cool, fragrant aroma filled my mouth. This was top-grade tea, grown in the snow. Before spring, the farmers would brave the blizzards to pick the tenderest buds. An ounce of this tea was worth 1,000 gold pieces. I had painstakingly had it sent here, only to be accused of extravagance instead of receiving a word of thanks. But she didn't seem to mind drinking it. She'd gone through over 10 pounds in 2 years. Seeing everyone remain silent, the meek Rosalie finally spoke up. "Sister, I know you don't like me, but Arthur and I are truly in love. Please don't blame us." She looked like a fragile white flower, ready to be blown over by the wind. And so I became the villain again, the target of a dozen glares. It was a shame Daisy wasn't here to learn a thing or two. Now, that was how a woman should act. "Miss Rosalie, since both mother and my husband are fond of you, I am in no position to object. We will do as mother says. You shall be a concubine," I said. Since I couldn't stop them, I might as well be gracious. "The wind chime courtyard is currently empty. I will have the servants prepare it for you." The wind chime courtyard was the closest to Arthur's own, so it was a generous offer. Unfortunately, Arthur was ungrateful. "No need. Rosalie will live with me." He was truly grinding my face into the dirt. I forced a smile, resisting the urge to throw my tea in his face. "As long as you are happy, my husband." Their goal achieved. The three of them breathed a sigh of relief and ordered dinner to be served. Course after course of delicacies were brought out, but I couldn't even be bothered to pick up my chopsticks. Rosalie's eyes, however, lit up. Arthur thoughtfully served her, their loving interactions a sight to behold for anyone else. For me, it was like watching my money bleed away. Large yellow croaker, 220 silver taels. Braised shark fin, 80 taels. 5 snake soup, 100 taels. Clear broth bird's nest soup, 200 taels. The chefs at home are still the best. "It has been a long time since I've had such a delicious meal," Arthur said, finishing his second bowl of rice and asking for a third. His mother was delighted to see his good appetite. "As long as you like it, I'll have the kitchen make it for you again tomorrow." Again tomorrow. I sneered inwardly. "You wish, never mind the cost." The ingredients themselves were rare finds. It had taken me a month to gather them, and they were originally intended for my father's birthday. He had no other hobbies besides his love for fine food. And now, a month of effort had been for someone else's benefit. Rosalie ate with gusto, and the old madam also seemed to find the meal exceptionally fragrant, having an extra bowl of soup. I sighed. My poor Silver. Arthur rested for a day before returning to court. The emperor was greatly pleased, offering much praise but very few rewards. I, on the other hand, was inexplicably granted a noble title. Daisy also brought good news. Though many had their eyes on the land in the western suburbs, my deep pockets had won out. I had acquired it for a price 20% above market value. It was planting season. Half the land was farmland, but the other half lay fallow, a terrible waste. As a businesswoman, I had to maximize my resources. After a quick calculation on my golden abacus, I took out another stack of silver notes. Use the other half of the land to build an inn and restaurant, build a road straight to the top of the western mountain. Do you understand what I mean? This was something I had seen before I was married. In the south, a young woman had opened a country-style inn and restaurant at the foot of a mountain. At first, everyone had laughed at her, certain she would go bankrupt. But when her inn was completed, it coincided with the peach blossoms blooming all over the mountain. Tourists flocked to the area, Her restaurant was a massive success, and she made a fortune. Daisy had seen it too, and understood immediately. Her eyes lit up. The capital has no shortage of rich people. They're not afraid of high prices, only of things not being exclusive enough. Why don't we do what Miss Yue did and create a membership system? The more you spend, the higher your tier. I am sure some fool will spend a fortune. I patted her head in approval. As expected of the girl who grew up with me. So kind-hearted, not taking money from the poor. I entrusted this matter to Daisy. She knew the business inside and out. Though young, her methods were impressive. Just as I was dreaming of the silver pouring into my pockets, a maid came to announce that Miss Rosalie had arrived. Her full name was Rosalie Shi, a farmer's daughter from the border, often affected by war, never having enough to eat. But she was lucky. She met Arthur and ascended to the heavens in a single step. I had no particular issue with her. I had seen all sorts of monsters in the business world. My standards had lowered considerably. She came to me still looking timid, blushing before she even spoke. "Miss Rosalie, if you have something to say, please be direct," I said, playing with my golden abacus, its beads clacking. It was made of pure gold, small and exquisite, a birthday gift from my father when I was 10. Rosalie looked at the abacus, a strange light in her eyes. "Sister, my husband asked me to come discuss the matter of my entering the family. You know, if we delay too long, it will be inconvenient for me." She glanced down at her belly. I was stunned. It was just a concubine. Did he plan to make a huge affair of it? But from her expression, it seemed that was exactly his intention. I was speechless for a moment, then held my forehead. "Miss Rosalie, mother is still the head of this household. It is no use talking to me." I wasn't lying. The old madam made all the decisions in this manner. What say did I have? If it weren't for my wealth, I probably would have been kicked out long ago. Rosalie lowered her head, plotting something. Then she suddenly stood up, her tone a little cold. "Then I won't disturb you any longer, sister." Her maid quickly supported her, as if she were frail. I didn't think much of it until that evening, when Arthur stormed into my courtyard, demanding an explanation. He said Rosalie had started having stomach pains after leaving my place and had almost miscarried. He was convinced that I was jealous and wanted to harm her child. This was truly a case of being blamed for nothing. I had been looking at ledgers all afternoon. When would I have had the time to harm her? "My husband, do you truly not believe me?" He looked at me with disgust. "Isabel, if anything happens to Rosalie, I will not let you off." A chill ran through me. I laughed. "Since you are so convinced of my wickedness, then let us part ways. Let's divorce." My marriage to Arthur had been a mistake from the start. We were not fated to be, but my father had paid for it. The previous marquise had died young. Before Arthur's rise, the family had declined, left with nothing but an empty title. But my father saw that Arthur was young and ambitious, and a filial son. He believed he would be a good husband and poured money into him. When the emperor ordered him to the border and supplies were short, my father sent them. When the winter clothes were not warm enough, my father sent more. If it weren't illegal to privately manufacture weapons, my father probably would have sent swords and spears. It was only because of this that the old madam had lowered her noble head and agreed to our marriage. But my father, for all his calculations, had never imagined that Arthur would indeed be a good husband. Just not mine. Since I mentioned divorce, Arthur had not set foot in my courtyard again, and I was happy for the peace. I wasn't particularly sad. I had only met him a handful of times, let alone shared a husband's bed. No, he was busy marrying his true love, and had no time to bother with me. The manor was filled with a festive air, red silk flowers hanging everywhere. A stranger would have thought he was marrying a wife. Arthur couldn't bear to see Rosalie wronged and insisted on the best of everything. The porcelain had to be from the finest kilns, the furniture from the rarest wood, the embroidery on her wedding dress in gold thread. A level of pomp and circumstance that I, his legal wife, had never received, was now on full display, as if he wanted the whole world to know how much he doted on his concubine. I flicked my golden abacus, marveling. When he married me, The family had pleaded poverty, and everything was kept simple, costing less than 2,000 silver taels in total. Now it seemed they had struck it rich. Marrying a concubine cost at least 50,000. As I was strolling through the manor, I ran into her again. Her complexion had improved considerably. The capital's air was certainly nourishing. Her belly seemed a little bigger, a triumphant look on her face. "Sister, I must thank you for arranging my wedding." I quickly denied it. "Your wedding was arranged by mother and my husband. I had nothing to do with it. If I didn't make that clear, and something went wrong, it would surely be my fault." Remembering the last time, I took 3 large steps back, afraid she would try to frame me. The smile on Rosalie's face froze. Then she awkwardly changed the subject, gently stroking her belly. "My husband said that, after I give birth to the heir, he will elevate me to an equal wife. He was worried you wouldn't agree, but I know you are not such a jealous woman." My face turned cold before, when they acted up, I could tolerate it. She was just a concubine. No matter how much he doted on her, she couldn't cause too much trouble. The crime of favoring a concubine over the legal wife, if reported by a censor, would be enough for Arthur to lose the emperor's favor. The current emperor was the legitimate heir, and had nearly been usurped by his illegitimate brother. If not for his own brother, the prince, who had fought to the death for him, someone else might be on the throne. Thus he detested officials who favored their concubines. An equal wife was still a concubine, just a nicer-sounding title, but she had said, "After I give birth to the heir." So even before the child was born, Arthur had already decided to make it the heir. The legal wife was not dead yet, and he was already planning to install the son of a concubine as the heir. Did he think I would be barren for the rest of my life? Fine. I never wanted to have a child with him anyway. These past 2 years were a waste. A forced union is not only not sweet, but it rots and stinks. It was time to let myself go. Meeting Rosalie's smiling eyes, I said coldly, "I am." Invitations from the manor were sent out everywhere, as if announcing to the world, "I, Arthur, favor my concubine over my wife. Come and impeach me." There hadn't been any major events at court for a while. The censors were looking for a way to make their presence known to the emperor, and naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. The emperor not only publicly reprimanded Arthur but also demoted him from a marquis to an earl. I was sitting in a restaurant, sipping tea and listening to the gossip from the next table. The man spoke with such conviction, as if he had been there himself. This restaurant was also one of my properties, a high-end establishment for the wealthy. The second floor was private rooms. To prevent eavesdropping, the paper on the windows was very thin. As long as one was discreet, the next room wouldn't hear a thing. But the brave soul next door clearly didn't care who heard him shouting like a fishwife as he berated Arthur from head to toe. I nibbled on my green bean cakes, thoroughly enjoying the show. After about half an hour, I had finished a plate of cakes and my tea. He seemed to have run out of insults. The room next door fell silent. I stood up, needing to use the restroom. But then they changed the subject. "Have you found out who bought the land in the western suburbs yet?" Another man replied meekly. "It was Miss Sterling. She paid 90,000 silver taels. Our prince's estate. We simply didn't have that much money." I pulled my foot back and straightened my clothes, ordering another pot of tea. The brave soul seemed to be choking, silent for a long time. Just as I was losing interest, he roared, "Arthur treats her so badly, and she still buys land for him. She is as stupid as a pig." Still not satisfied, he added, "They're all rotten." The tea in my cup suddenly lost its flavor. What did I do now? It is one thing to curse Arthur, but what did I do wrong? Who said the land was for him? As if enraged, the man slammed down his chopsticks and stormed out. As he passed my door, he inexplicably stopped. A gaze seemed to pierce through the thin paper and land on me. Thankfully, he didn't barge in. After finishing the second pot of tea, I couldn't hold it any longer. I took care of my business and headed home, feeling much lighter. As I left, I casually remarked, "The paper on the second floor windows is too thin." The manager made a note. "Rest assured, madam, I will have it seen to at once. I nodded and got into my carriage. On the way, I kept thinking about the man from the next room. They had mentioned a prince's estate, and the land in the western suburbs. Could it be the prince? The voice sounded somewhat familiar, but why would he want to buy land? Before I could think further, the carriage stopped. We had arrived. The red silk on the stone lions had been removed. Inside the gates, all the festive red was gone. The entire residence felt lifeless. Could it be true? Had Arthur been demoted? Seeing me return, the old madam pointed a finger at my nose and yelled, "The family is in turmoil, and you still have the mind to go out. You are a jinx." I couldn't be bothered to argue. I looked at the furniture and belongings piled in the courtyard and almost laughed out loud. If I wasn't mistaken, this was probably everything the family owned. Arthur had really gone all out for his sweetheart. When he married me, rumors had spread that he was a kept man, living off his wife's money. The old madam had held a grudge against me for a long time. Now, with this opportunity, she couldn't wait to show the world that her family was successful and had plenty of money. So she hadn't stopped Arthur's extravagance. She had even contributed to it. Rosalie's face was pale, as if she hadn't recovered from the shock. I smiled and comforted her. "Don't worry, Miss Rosalie. As long as your husband has you in his heart, these worldly possessions are nothing." She showed no gratitude, instead looking at me with resentment. After listening to the old madam's complaints, I finally understood. The emperor had issued a decree. Rosalie was from the border, and it was hard to guarantee she wasn't an enemy spy. The marriage was to be postponed. They had been counting on the wedding gifts to recoup their losses. Now they were completely broke. And Arthur, who had been a meritorious official with a bright future, would now find it difficult to advance. The old madam's face was grim. Her attitude towards Rosalie had done a complete 180. Since the emperor has decreed it, the marriage is off. If not for the baby in her belly, she probably would have kicked her out right then and there. I said nothing. It had nothing to do with me. Arthur was no longer as protective of Rosalie as before, ignoring his mother's words. His expression was dark, his fists clenched. If it weren't for the prince targeting me, I wouldn't have been punished like this. The prince? So it really was him. Life in the manor became increasingly difficult. The quality of the meals declined day by day. Although Arthur's salary was not low, his expenses were even higher. Never mind the household expenses. Just the gifts he had to give were a huge expenditure. Connections were everything at court. Every celebration and funeral required money. If the gift wasn't appropriate, and he ran into trouble later, there would be no one to speak up for him. And if you were going to give a gift, it couldn't be too shabby. These were all noble families. A cheap gift was an insult. Better to give nothing at all. When I was in charge of the gifts, I was always generous. Anything that could be solved with money wasn't a problem. So even though my background was not noble, my reputation among the ladies was not bad. Since Arthur brought Rosalie back, I had not spent a single penny. When we were a family, it was one thing. Now we were about to not be a family. If I spent any more money, I would truly be as stupid as a pig. After sending a few gifts, Arthur's already poor reputation worsened. He had been so extravagant with the betrothal gifts. Why was he so stingy now? Did he think the court officials and imperial relatives were less important than a concubine? Arthur couldn't explain his predicament. He came to my courtyard several times, complaining and hinting that I should contribute, but I never took the bait. Watching him leave empty-handed, he looked like a defeated rooster. His head hung low. The more miserable the manor became, the more flamboyant I became, dressing in gold and silver. At dusk, a cosmetic shop sent over their new products, each with a unique charm. I was intrigued and opened all a dozen boxes, almost dazzled by the sight. Before I could try them, the old madam's maid came to invite me for dinner. I took my time getting ready, putting on a delicate bracelet before I stood up. I could clearly see the disdain in the maid's eyes. She was just jealous of my beauty. The phoenix tree in the courtyard had shed its leaves. I stopped to admire it for a moment, lamenting how quickly time passed. The maid didn't dare to rush me and just stood there, staring at the tree, seemingly finding nothing special about it. I shook my head. A connoisseur like Daisy was truly rare. This tree was also part of my dowry, a rare species transported from the south, pruned by a master gardener, and planted in a spot personally chosen by a feng shui master. Each tree was worth a fortune. The family had thought I was too ostentatious, but they didn't know that the understated things were often the most expensive. When I arrived at the dining hall, Arthur was there. Rosalie was absent. The old madam saw my jewels, and, for once, didn't give me a sour look. She was even somewhat gentle. "Isabel, sit. Have some tea." She didn't call me Mrs. Sterling. She was definitely up to no good. Was she trying to poison me? I suspiciously lifted the cup, deciding they wouldn't dare. I took a small sip. It was unremarkable black tea, just enough to quench my thirst. Nothing special. I finally understood. The old lady was also hoping I would use my money to support the household. I didn't let on, drinking one cup after another, as if I didn't notice the difference. The old madam grew impatient. She frowned and took a sip herself. "Don't you notice anything wrong with this tea?" she asked, incredulous. My face was a perfect mask of confusion. Then I smiled politely. "Mother's tea is, of course, excellent." Her face fell. "The tea you sent a few days ago? I thought that was quite good. It is easy to go from frugality to luxury, but difficult to go from luxury to frugality. Once you are used to delicacies, how can you go back to simple fare? But what a shame. You were the ones who chose the simple fare." The snow. Bud tea is indeed fine, but it is priceless. If I couldn't finish it, I could always make tea eggs. The old madam couldn't say any more. Noble families valued their reputation. She couldn't just ask her daughter-in-law to use her own money to support the household. If word got out, generations of the family's honor would be lost. Of course, she didn't give up. "Next month on the 6th, the Duke's heir is getting married. Prepare a generous gift for Arthur. He is busy with official duties, so you should handle it for him." I laughed lightly. "Next month on the 5th is my father's birthday. I am currently busy preparing his gift and don't have the time. Perhaps Mother could prepare it for my husband. Your taste is impeccable. The gift you choose will surely please the Duke's family." The old madam wanted to say more, but Arthur gritted his teeth. "Mother, if she is unwilling, we shouldn't force her." Ha! So principled. I thought that since we had torn off the pretense, Arthur would quickly agree to a divorce. But he dragged it out until spring, refusing to nod his head. Daisy was sighing with me. She had just returned from my family's home, saying my father was so sad to hear of my plight that he ate half a bowl of rice less. Just as I was marveling at our deep father-daughter bond, Arthur unexpectedly arrived, holding a piece of paper. I couldn't even be bothered to be polite. "What are you here for?" He had an undisguised look of joy on his face, a stark contrast to his usual gloom. He threw the letter of divorce in my face. "You are no longer a wife of this family. Leave the manor at once." I was stunned. Was this a blessing from heaven? It was Daisy who reminded me to look at the letter. I finally came to my senses and read it carefully. I have to say, Arthur was as shameless as ever. The reason for the divorce was my failure to produce an heir. As if he didn't know why I hadn't produced an heir, would he only be happy if he were cuckolded? Fine, fine. As long as I could leave, I didn't care about the reason. Not wanting to wait a moment longer, I immediately started packing. Luckily, I had many houses, and there was one right near the manor. Daisy called over dozens of my family's servants to move my dowry to my own house. I had brought 99 chests of dowry when I married. After they were moved, the storage room was empty. As for the other things I had bought, of course, I was taking them all. Bed linens, clothes, furniture, pots and pans. Everything had been bought with a great deal of money. They could be sold at a pawn shop for a good price. I couldn't leave the things in Arthur's courtyard either. I personally supervised the moving, carefully searching to make sure nothing was missed. Rosalie, who was drinking porridge, forgot her manners, and despite her large belly, came forward to question me. "What are you doing?" My husband has divorced you. What right do you have to touch the family's property? I laughed. No wonder she always looked at me so strangely, as if I owed her money. So she thought my wealth and glory were all from the manor, and was eager to take my place. You are new to the capital, so it is understandable that you don't know who I am. I'll tell you now. I am the only daughter of the richest merchant in the empire. The bed you sleep on, the tables and chairs you use, even the fabric of your clothes, were all bought with my money. Considering the child in her belly, I magnanimously left her things behind. Before sunset, I gracefully walked out of the manor. Behind me, a servant carried the phoenix tree, which was already sprouting new leaves, panting heavily. As for the old madam, who fainted from shock upon seeing the empty house and the large pits in the courtyard, that was certainly none of my business. All I knew was that the moment I stepped out of that gate, it was the most carefree and happy I had been in 2 years. As for becoming a laughingstock, I couldn't care less. I could still wear the finest clothes, the most expensive jewelry, and earn the most money. I didn't go back to my family's home. My brother was married and, though they wouldn't mind, it wouldn't look good for a divorced woman to return. Daisy and I found a charming house and lived freely, spending money extravagantly without worrying about tarnishing the family's reputation. The restaurant in the western suburbs was starting to take shape, even in its early stages. It was already more impressive than the best restaurant in the capital. When it was completed, it would be a magnificent sight. Life suddenly became colorful. I took advantage of the free time to inspect my properties. After a quick calculation on my golden abacus, I arrived at a staggering number. I sighed. With this much money, it is not just 8 lifetimes. It is 800. Daisy gave me a resentful look, then coaxed me to take her out to eat. Let's go, I'll take you out to spend some money. I tucked a stack of silver notes into my sleeve, my smile as bright as a flower. Daisy rolled her eyes. The whole restaurant is yours. What money are you spending? I was speechless, unable to argue. If you wanted to hear the most gossip, besides the brothels, it was the restaurants. The main hall was the liveliest. Daisy and I sat in a corner. At the next table were 2 well-dressed young men, and they were talking about my ex-husband. I don't know what Princess Amelia sees in him. In terms of status, talent, or looks, what does he have? Exactly, I heard he divorced his wife of many years just to marry the princess. Such a lack of character is truly despicable. Daisy stifled a laugh, I muttered. I was not a wife of many years. But at least I finally understood why Arthur had suddenly agreed to let me go. He had found a better prospect. Though I had a fortune in terms of status, I couldn't compare to a princess. Even a fool would choose the princess. After scorning Arthur, the 2 young men turned the conversation to the princess's brother, Prince Theodore. I hear the prince is planning to marry. Your sister finally has a chance. The other young man laughed. My family wouldn't dare. Who knows when he'll lose the family estate? I thoughtfully cracked a melon seed. Daisy listened to their conversation, occasionally covering her mouth to hide a giggle. I shook my head, sighing. The prince really had it coming. His story was no secret. In short, he was a prodigal son. As the emperor's own brother, he was deeply trusted. When he first established his own residence, he was showered with gifts and was the epitome of glamour. But one day, an imperial gift suddenly appeared in a pawn shop, causing a huge stir. Only then did the emperor realize that his favorite brother had fallen to the point of pawning his possessions to survive. The prince's wealth was undoubtedly vast: salary, rewards, fiefdoms. With normal spending, it would have lasted 8 lifetimes. But he had a peculiar hobby: busyness. The empire was quite tolerant of merchants, even encouraging them. A significant portion of the state's taxes came from them. So, a skilled merchant like my father was considered a meritorious contributor in the emperor's eyes. But the prince was a once-in-a-century business anomaly. Any business he touched was doomed to fail. Any shop he invested in would close within 3 months. Many shopkeepers, upon being noticed by him, would close up and flee overnight. 3 years ago, he had personally come to my family's home. proposing a partnership to open a silk shop in the barren Northwest. He was full of confidence, saying that the people there wore rough cloth, and that a proper silk shop would be a huge success. Me father and I exchanged a look, and we both felt the same way. We mercilessly rejected him. He didn't give up. He actually went to the Northwest and opened a silk shop. He poured a river of silver into it, but it didn't even make a ripple. He returned to the capital in disgrace. By then, I was already married, so I heard little news of him. I just hadn't expected his sister to have her eye on Arthur. With the gossip as our appetizer, Daisy and I ate a whole table of food. When I came to my senses, my belly was bulging. I was so full I had to discreetly loosen my belt. "My lady, you have to mind your image. How will you ever get married looking like this?" Daisy said, hiking up her own skirt, a clear case of the pot calling the kettle black. Luckily, we were in a corner, out of sight. The dinner rush was over, and the hall was quieter. The two young men who had been talking non-stop were now leaning back, gossiping about the prince's love life. Just as I was getting into it, they suddenly gasped and fell off their chairs. They scrambled up and bowed. "Your Highness." I turned to see a man in a deep purple robe, his face as handsome as jade, his presence enchanting. Though it wasn't the first time I had seen him, I was still captivated by his beauty. With such looks, even his profligacy was forgivable. "My lady, what do we do?" Daisy also recognized him, but I thought it was best to pretend we didn't. The prince seemed to be in a good mood, but I was inexplicably nervous, convinced his next words would be an invitation to sell cloth in the Northwest. Daisy and I bowed our heads like quails. A clear voice suddenly sounded above us. "Miss Sterling, it has been a long time." I looked up with a dry laugh. "Your Highness is as dashing as ever." BFF'd. Behind the prince, a handsome young man burst out laughing, but when he spoke, it was a woman's voice. "Brother, I've finally met your Miss Sterling. She is truly a delight." Calling the prince brother. "Then she must be Princess Amelia." What she said didn't matter. The prince frowned, seemingly displeased with his sister's words. He looked at me, about to speak. At moments like this, all I had to do was play dead, keep my eyes down, and say nothing. "Miss Sterling, if you are free, you are welcome to visit my residence," he said. Then, as if it were an afterthought, added, "My sister will be there too." I readily agreed. Whether I would actually go was another matter. I hadn't seen Princess Amelia again, but I soon heard news of her marriage. The whole city was talking about it. Arthur once again became a laughingstock. The emperor had betrothed her to the heir of a duke. It had nothing to do with Arthur. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. That was more like it. How could such a lovely young girl be wasted on a fool like Arthur? Hearing the princess loved to paint, I immediately found a famous masterpiece from my collection and had Daisy send it to the prince's residence. It was a small matter, but the next day, the prince himself came to thank me. I quickly changed and went to greet him. On the way, I saw many unfamiliar people, some carrying chests, others holding boxes. Just as I was wondering what was going on, the prince stood up to greet me. Miss Sterling's gift was too precious. I was ashamed to accept it. "I have chosen a few trinkets from my residence in return. I hope you will accept them." I thought to myself, the gift wasn't for you. I turned to look at Daisy, and she was just as shocked. It seemed I had sent it to the wrong person. It was too late to take it back. I could only say dryly, "Your Highness is too kind. I am glad you liked it. It was nothing of value." Years ago, before the artist became famous, he had been a guest in our home. Ashamed to be a freeloader, he had painted many pictures for my father. Later, when he became famous, his paintings became priceless. Only then did my father have the entire room of paintings stored away, so it really wasn't worth much, just a few meals. The prince was silent for a long moment, then said faintly, "Miss Sterling is indeed generous." I chose to remain silent. The atmosphere became awkward. I secretly sized up the gifts he had brought. At first glance, they were dazzlingly beautiful. At a second glance, something seemed off. A golden phoenix hairpin, a golden headdress with dangling pearls, a silk brocade with a phoenix pattern. Was he trying to get me killed? My legs trembled. My voice shook. I was about to fall to my knees. Your Highness, I don't want to die yet. He was stunned. Who said anything about you dying? From his expression, did he not know what he had brought? I am but a commoner. I cannot use the phoenix motif. Your Highness is putting me in a difficult position. He looked at the things he had brought, was silent for a moment, then said coolly, "Keep them. You'll be able to use them in the future." Only the ladies of the palace, the princesses and the royal consorts could use these things. I could keep them for an eternity and never be able to use them. Wait, could it be that he had taken a fancy to me? Or perhaps my money? After a moment of thought, the latter seemed more likely. Considering my family's fortune and the prince's spending habits, I shook my head, dismissing the terrifying thought. He didn't stay long. Before he left, he shared the latest gossip. Arthur has started selling his possessions. I never knew a prince cared about gossip. I instantly felt a closer connection to him, my smile becoming much brighter. Thank you, Your Highness. As for what I was thanking him for, he probably knew. In May, the weather had turned warm, and the number of visitors to the western suburbs had increased. Leaning against a railing, I looked out at the endless golden wheat fields on one side, and the lush apricot grove on the other. Up close, you could see the branches laden with orange, yellow apricots. On the first day of the restaurant's opening, I was dressed to the nines in a deep red brocade dress, the hem embroidered with a large apricot blossom design in gold thread, echoing the golden apricot blossom hairpin in my hair. I graciously met the gazes of the guests and instructed the waiters to serve a plate of freshly picked yellow apricots to each table. The sweet and sour apricots were an excellent appetizer and received much praise. Manny decided on the spot to go pick apricots on the western mountain after their meal. The road to the mountain was lined with shops selling all sorts of things. Compared to the bustling city, this place had a unique charm. The prince also graced us with his presence. When he saw me, his eyes seemed to light up. "Miss Sterling, this place is truly wonderful. Might I inquire about investing?" I racked my brain for a way to refuse him. He, very considerately, saved me the trouble. "I am just kidding." "Fine. You are hilarious." We walked side by side on the stone path. The cool mountain breeze was refreshing. "Your Highness seemed to want to buy this land as well?" I asked, feeling very fortunate that I had offered more money. The prince stopped and thought for a moment. Then a smile bloomed on his face. In that instant, all the scenery around us faded, leaving only his unparalleled beauty. "I once promised a little girl that I would plant the largest field for her, with the most grain, so she would have endless green bean cakes to eat," he said with a sigh. "Unfortunately, my pockets were empty." I frowned. I felt like I had heard this somewhere before. It seemed like something a little boy had said to me a long time ago. Back then, the empire had suffered a major flood. Grain prices had soared, and many people were starving. Refugees from other areas had poured into the capital. Every day, you could see bodies on the streets. My family had a lot of grain stored, but for the hundreds of thousands of refugees, it was a drop in the ocean. My father set up a porridge stall. The porridge got thinner and thinner until it was like water with a few grains of rice. As I was drinking the thin porridge, a beautifully dressed little boy was holding a green bean cake. The sweet smell made my mouth water. I traded a bowl of porridge for the cake, then crumbled it into the pot. There were too many refugees, and not enough porridge. We could only give it to the children. One by one, the emaciated children devoured the porridge, licking their bowls clean, savoring the hint of sweetness. The boy and I sat to the side. He quietly watched me drool. The pot was scraped clean, and in the end, I didn't get a single bite as he was leaving. The boy told me that one day, he would plant the largest field for me, with the most grain, and make me endless green bean cakes. He sat in his magnificent carriage, his expression serious. I said, "I will become the most powerful businesswoman in the empire, earn the most money, and buy all your land and green bean cakes." The man before me and the boy from my memory overlapped. Though it was a strange thought, it was plausible. He had kept his childhood promise all these years. I was touched, but at the same time, my liver ached. So you wasted all that money for me. Thinking of all the silver that had gone down the drain. Not only did my liver ache, but my whole body ached. As the future most powerful businesswoman in the empire, there were 3 things I hated most in life. 1. Losing money. 2. Losing money, and 3. Still losing money. I glanced at his face and sighed silently. Fine. It was a loss I could afford. The view from the top of the mountain was the best. The 100 acres of apricot trees and 1,000 acres of farmland were all in sight. The stream of visitors was endless. I was ecstatic. 10 silver taels. 20, 30. In just a short time, several hundred taels had come in. This was also an idea I had borrowed from the young woman in the south. To enter the mountain, you had to pay. The guards at the foot of the mountain were sent by the prince, all but announcing to everyone that I was under his protection. No one would dare to not pay. Though he had no money, his status was second only to the emperor. He was not afraid of offending people. As we sat in the pavilion, the smile on the prince's face never faded. I don't know what was so funny. Isabel, what do you think of me? His eyes were like a clear spring. The mountain breeze blew, creating ripples. My gaze fell on his chin. I swallowed, and was about to speak, when we were interrupted. Your Highness, greetings, Your Highness. A crowd of noble young men squeezed into the pavilion, one of them a familiar face. I said nothing, just quietly watched the prince's face go from rosy to dark. But the group showed no intention of leaving, chattering away. After a while, one of them said, Brother Arthur was blessed with a daughter yesterday. And today, we run into Your Highness. It must be fate. Perhaps Your Highness would grace her with a name. The scene instantly fell silent. Someone tugged on the speaker's sleeve, motioning for him to shut up. Arthur's face was stiff, but he had no choice but to step forward. Your Highness's words are worth 1,000 gold pieces. This official would not dare to presume. Bean, the prince said, his face expressionless. 2,000 gold pieces. Have it sent to my residence. So Arthur's daughter was named Bean. It was actually kind of cute. Arthur gritted his teeth and bowed. Thank you, Your Highness, for the name. To break the awkward silence, someone praised with their eyes closed. Green, the color of hope. Bean, a symbol of reaping what you sow. A truly excellent name. So that is how it could be interpreted. I couldn't help but give him an appreciative look. If you are not the top scholar next year, I'll be the first to object. The prince shot him a cold glare, his impatience written all over his face. Now even a fool knew it was time to leave. Your Highness, this official takes his leave. Your Highness, this official takes his leave. Your Highness, Your Royal Highness, this official takes his leave. The man next to him quickly covered his mouth. Seeing the prince say nothing, he hurried him away, whispering, You idiot. The prince isn't married. The man replied foolishly, I just arrived in the capital, I didn't know. But the prince and that lady look so good together. I silently held my forehead. That whisper was not a whisper at all. The prince looked down, adjusting his robes, but I could clearly see that he was hiding a smile. In the end, only Arthur remained. In just 2 months he had aged considerably. The worn clothes he was wearing were ones I had made for him when I was still in the manor. His foundations were not deep, and the old madam was used to a life of luxury. I heard she hadn't reined in her spending since I left. I don't know how long their meager fortune would last. Your Highness, this official feels it necessary to remind you that the woman by your side is this official's caste. Off-wife. She is arrogant and extravagant by nature, he said with hatred. Your Highness is of noble status. Do not tarnish your reputation for a discarded woman. Come to think of it, he wasn't wrong. I was indeed not low. He and I had been married. Besides beauty and money, I had nothing. A man like the prince was not someone I should be thinking about. A sudden warmth spread through my hand. I turned to see a large hand holding mine. "You may be blind, but I am not," a cold voice said, without a trace of warmth. I realized then that he could also be intimidating. "I have already requested the Emperor's permission to marry Isabel. The next time you see her, she will be the most noble princess in the Empire," the prince said, pulling my hand and walking down the mountain without looking back. I was still in a daze. What just happened? The warmth in my palm was so real. I struggled slightly, but was held even tighter. "Your Highness, you are going the wrong way." He finally stopped and said sullenly, "My name is Theodore." Of course, I knew your name was Theodore, but even if you told me, I wouldn't dare to call you that. Everything I just said was true. This time, I will not miss my chance with you. He started rambling, telling me many things. It turned out that when he went to my family's home 3 years ago, it wasn't to sell cloth, but to ask my father for my hand in marriage. My father had set a condition: if he could successfully open a silk shop in the barren lands, he would give me to him. It was clearly a polite refusal, but he had pretended not to understand and had actually gone. But then he had heard the news of my marriage in the Northwest. He had rushed back to the capital, and on my wedding day, had had the Emperor send Arthur to the border. Was Rosalie also your arrangement? They were already attracted to each other. I just gave them a little push," he said, not feeling at all that he had done anything wrong. "Arthur appears righteous on the surface, but he is actually selfish, and has none of his father's noble character." I couldn't agree more. My father had chosen him mostly because he thought that such a great man would surely have a great son. But Arthur had turned out to be just like his mother. "So, will you be my princess?" His gaze was intense, his handsome face full of sincerity, as if refusing him would make me a terrible person. And since I was a kind person, I naturally couldn't be a terrible person. My lips curved upwards, my eyes crinkling with a smile. I continued our earlier conversation. "I think you are quite fine," before his smile could fully bloom. I threw a bucket of cold water on him. "But the silk shop in the Northwest isn't open yet, Theodore." I mentally calculated how much silver would have to be poured into it. I couldn't help but sigh. It seemed I would have to work even harder to earn money in the future. After all, I had a prodigal son to support. It wasn't until we had walked a long way that a clear laugh sounded behind me. Theodore shouted, "Isabel, we have a long future ahead of us."